Thank you for joining us today. In this webinar, we will be using an Algebra 1 end-of-year task to consider design criteria that we can apply to any end-of-year task. My name is Jennifer Kim, and I'm part of the Math Curriculum and Instruction team. And joining me today are two of my colleagues, actually, Wendy and Kieran. But Wendy will be with us the whole time, helping to moderate. So if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Wendy Thomas Williams here, or Wendy Williams, aka how you doing? I hope you guys are having a good afternoon. We're glad to have you here, and don't forget to chat me directly if you're having any particular issues that I might be able to help you troubleshoot. And any other questions, feel free. Chat me directly.
Wendy's the go-to person. So if you have any questions about the technical things, go to her. A little bit of context real quick of who we are for folks who are not familiar with New Visions. We are a nonprofit organization that provides curriculum resources, professional learning, and school systems and operations support. And for those of you who are familiar with the New York City education landscape, we are an affinity network of the DOE, New York City DOE, and also a charter management organization supporting the humanities, AMS, and AIM schools. So we have some folks from those schools here today too. Our agenda for today is here. So we're in the introduction and framing. We're gonna go through an experience, exploration, and exchanging of ideas. And then we'll close out with some Q&A and final thoughts. To dive into what we're going to experience, there is an Algebra 1 end-of-year task called Graphing Stories, which is on our remote.newvisions.org site. And we're going to be experiencing a couple of the micro-routines that are embedded in the task, and then explore the task as an entirety to consider what are the design elements that were used to create the task, and then exchange ideas around these elements and how you might incorporate that in your learning context. So the explore and exchange ideas will be in breakout sessions, so you'll have an opportunity to explore in a smaller group. Where this is coming from, this is on the left, a template of our learning plans, and we're going to be focusing on the right-hand column, which actually lists out student-facing materials. So just a quick note about our learning plans is that they're intended for multiple days. It's not like an individual day learning plan. So all of these materials are expected to be used over a course of about a week or two, depending on how you calendar it. And we do have a suggestion for that. Where we're gonna be looking is the React slides in our launch, which is a microroutine, and then also a choice and change microroutine in the exploration. So we'll get a chance to see what that's like from the student perspective. So here's our experience. So we're gonna do our React microroutine, and this was adapted for remote learning. You'll have a minute to react to a video clip and think about, this reminds me of. And then, so this is just to reflect and think, and then you'll have 2 minutes to share your reaction in the live chat and read through what others have written and be ready to explain your reaction. So you'll have a minute, and I'm gonna get the timer ready. So 1 minute to watch this video clip and think about what this reminds you of. So you'll have a chance to share your reaction in the live chat. Does anybody want to see that clip again? Just want to make sure. Yes? Okay, so I'll share that one more time. So I'm gonna play music for a timer. So as you hear the music, I want you to share your reaction in the live chat. This reminds me of, that clip reminds me of. And once you've entered your chat, you can read through what others have written and just be ready to explain your reaction with the class. Okay. So I'm gonna have a couple of folks share out their reaction, and you can start with, I had this reaction because. Jonathan, do you mind sharing about the multiplication and how this reminds you of multiplication tables?
Yeah, not at all. Something about, there was the counter in the corner. So I just happened to notice that it was going up to 15. And the second time you showed the video, I was trying to like pay attention for the math part of this. So yeah, so just the 5 people with the 15 counter made me just think of, you know, basic multiplication tables.
Okay, so there's an element of multiplication with the counter and the five sets of hands. Great. Can I also, Nakia, would you mind sharing about your reaction about how this reminds you of distributing time and rate?
I said it reminded me of like distribution because, you know, he was giving out, I don't know, the hand was giving out the cards and distributing it basically even to everyone that was at the table, which made me think of rate of change and time, and also like graphing it because the graph quickly popped on the screen, and I know that's like a first quadrant, so that's like a real world connection. So I just felt like it had a lot to do with the rate at which the cards were being distributed and how that could represent something being linear for rate of change, because it was like even for me.
Yes, great, thank you.
Think a lot, sorry.
No, that's great. So there's a lot of reminders of some of the mathematics behind this task, which makes sense for this group to share. When doing this with students, we might want to highlight some of the work more about the time in the cafeteria or like teaming to start out with, and then kind of lead into the mathematics. But of course, it makes sense for us to focus in on that. So where this happens is in the launch of the end of year assignment that we're going to be looking at as a way to help students make sense of the context that they're going to be diving into. So that's where this is situated. The next one we're going to do is called choice and change. And this is situated in the exploration part as a way for students to think about how they might brainstorm. So we're going to go through that real quick. So this is our choice and change micro routine. You'll have a minute to think about a list of story ideas and think about the question, which story idea do you connect with or like the most? And then you'll have 2 minutes in the chat, write one way you would change the story to make it your own. And just be ready to explain your choice with the group. So I'm gonna share a list. So you'll have a minute to think about before typing. So this is independent think time. Which story idea do you connect with or like the most? That's about a minute. So you'll have 2 minutes to share your reaction in the live chat. So write one way you would change the story you chose to make it your own, and then you'll be able to read through other people's responses. And just be ready to explain your choice with the class. So again, I'm gonna put 2 minutes So you have time to type while the music goes on. Uh, One way you would change the story you chose. Oh, yes. Okay. Okay. So we're getting different responses about changing some of the quantities in the story, and then in some cases changing what that quantity is or the context for that quantity. That's great. Could I have Monique? Can you share your choice and change to the group?
Okay, hi. I just was thinking about ice cream because it's so hot right now. So literally that was the reason I chose that when I feel like I connected. I don't even eat ice cream, but I don't know. Whatever, I connected with it. So I was just thinking about the number of cones being sold and how like variables can affect the number of cones being sold. So like what if the freezer broke? How would your sales be affected? Or like, you know, like the weather or temperature affects the number of sales. So I just thought about it from that lens.
Yeah, so thinking about the context that affects the quantities of this thing.
Exactly.
Cool, thank you. So these are some great ideas, and you can think about, you know, if you have time just to scan through what other folks are writing, and if you wanted to add more, you can. One thing I wanted to note is that in the slide deck that I shared with you, there is a slide that is not visible in presentation mode, but that is an example of how, if you were doing this with students, you could give an example of what kinds of responses you're hoping for from this. So in the chat, if you wouldn't mind writing Q1, chat about how you would use these microroutines with your students. So we just went through two. How would you use them with your students or with folks you support? Okay. So using it to give students entry, using it as an icebreaker to start off lessons. And these actually can be used it's a nice way to start the year. Yes, it definitely gives a low stakes way to enter into conversations. Yeah, React is a good one as entry. Yeah. All right. So a couple of people are saying that they would use it at the beginning of the year, and I think that's really important to note, especially with the routine. You do want to start it off so that it becomes routine for students. And so the expectation or the idea is that in this end of year task, students have had opportunities to go through these kinds of routines, so it's a little bit easier. But if not, that's okay too. It's still worthwhile to include. So you can continue to type responses in the chat. But a quick plug, these microroutines can be found on our remote.newvisions.org site. Those are the ones that have been modified to be in an online context, but we also have many more that our middle school literacy colleagues have put together, Caroline and Sophie. And so if you're interested, you can definitely take a look. So those two microroutines were in the larger end of year assignment, and there were some design considerations that were used to create the task. And so if we're thinking about end of year assignments that are used to assess student understanding, we want to make sure that they're connected to 2 to 3 high level standards. And in mathematics, we're talking about the domain or cluster level, and the math practice can be also included. The criteria for success should be included in student-friendly language, so students should have a clear sense of expectations of what they're responsible for. It should include multiple entry points, low floor, high ceiling, just kind of like the way that the micro routines are designed for that low stakes entry. And then connecting it to something more high ceiling. We wanted to align to student interests and connect to real world scenarios, give student choice, but the opportunities for choice are in the content they select, the way in which they present their work, and different modalities. So thinking about that, we also included tasks that could be completed fairly independently with a little bit of launch activity for the teacher. And so we included that in the design. And we want it to be so that students have had experiences with this technology before. So it's not that students have, even though we've included resources that use technology, if students haven't been exposed to those technology pieces, it may be necessary to think about what can they have access to that they've already used throughout the remote learning period. And we want to also name that there should be a low-tech alternative within the plan. And then we also considered what are some accommodations that are embedded for diverse learners. So including multiple modes of expression and how they think about self-regulation and reflection throughout the process. So these are criteria that we considered when designing this end-of-year task, and you can use if you want to design others like this. So you're going to have an opportunity to explore and exchange. And we're going to be in breakout rooms. So the resources that you're going to need for this activity is the slide deck. And then also you're going to want to open up the graphing stories end of year task, which looks like this and is linked into the slides, so you can access that. And then you also want to click on this link called Breakout Group Collaborative Notes. And this is where it describes the activity that we're going to be doing and some resources that you can use and where you can take notes. So what you want to do is assign roles for each person in the breakout, and then examine the graphing stories task and compare it to where are these considerations for design included. So note whether they are included and then what you notice about them and what you wonder. So if there are questions that come up, this is the space to have that conversation. If you're having conversations about how you might modify a particular element within the assignment, then you want to note that there too. So we're going to put 20 minutes for folks in their breakout rooms to have conversations. If you need to call Wendy or myself into your group, you can ask for help in the little bar below. So all of that is within this breakout room collaborative notes document. Before Wendy sends you off, make sure you have these three documents, slides available. And are there any questions?
Get ready, y'all. I'm gonna slink right in.
Wendy's gonna send you off. So we'll see you in 20 minutes. We're back in the whole group. In the chat, if you don't mind, real quickly, typing one key noticing or wondering that came up during your breakout discussion. And it's okay if you didn't get a chance to go through all of the considerations. It was more to have like a basis for conversation. Yeah, so there were conversations around the interpreting and building functions, which are key standards that go across other content. It's great. Yeah, the task itself, the graphing stories, hits multiple standards. And if you had a chance to look at the evidence of standards document, there definitely is, there is an emphasis on the major standards. So that's something to note. Yeah, so the standards were on several folks' mind. That's good. If you can continue to type your response of what is a noticing or wondering that came up in your breakout discussion, because we'd love to hear. But I wanted to give a quick note on feedback. So we have the assignment and there's some elements that are there, including the use of criteria for success that incorporate, in this case, a checklist, and as well as a model response. So just being mindful that in the assignment, because it's the end of year, we want to give students opportunities to revise based on feedback. And so here are some quick notes about how to do teacher to student asynchronous feedback. If you're interested in more examples and technology, there's actually a link to slides from a previous webinar that has that you can access. This resource is linked on the remote.nuvisions.org site, which many of you were able to find. It's linked in the slide as well. Our next webinar actually is this Thursday, and it's a repeat session. Wendy's going to be facilitating, so come join us. It's focused on fostering student discussions. So if you wanted to attend the previous one and weren't able to, please join us here. You can click on the link to register. And finally, we would love to hear your feedback. The link in the slides, if you are looking for CTLE credits, you do need to complete it. So the CTLE certificates, you can access it in 2 weeks by going back to your workshop account. And just a quick plug, some of you have heard this before, but NuVisions is hiring. So if you are interested in joining the NuVisions team or you know someone you think would be great, please check out the careers page. And thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, feel free to email myself or Wendy. Have a good rest of the day. Enjoy this nice weather.